Welcome everybody. It's a real honour to be able to host Lieutenant General Lawrence Nicholson, USMC retired. It's a real treat. Larry is an exceptional man, and I'm going to read out his background, but here at Azcende, it's really important that we host veterans like Larry, but moreover have conversations that talk about our business, which firmly relies on startups. But for us, why we do what we do is really about empowering leaders, empowering veterans to be able to recognize the value they have from their experience and service, and how that value can be extended in the business world, where fundamentally we can propel humanity into new heights. So it's a real treat today. I'm going to read out General Nicholson's history as far as ChatGPT tells it. I thought that'd be kind of a bit amusing. We're at that kind of loving phase of ChatGPT. I know we might not be too ChatGPT'd out. I'm not sure whether Larry, as he's familiar or reference, is aware of how ChatGPT recognizes him, but there are three other Larry Nicholsons, by the way, but I will obviously pick the correct one. So Lawrence D. Nicholson is a retired United States Marine Corps Lieutenant General who served as Commanding General of the 3rd Marine Expeditionary Force, leading 30,000 Marines and sailors in the Asia-Pacific region from 2015 to 2018. He graduated from the Citadel in 1979 and served as an infantry officer in the 1st Marine Division. He also commanded forces in Afghanistan and Iraq, where he was wounded in action. He retired from the Marine Corps in 2018 after 39 years of service. Is that correct, Larry, or is that slightly?
Nope. I think ChatGPT got it right. So
sweet. Okay.
It's my first touch with ChatGPT. Glad to know they're as accurate as you say.
Excellent. Fantastic. All right. Well, Larry, the first thing I'd love for you to do is give an overview of your story, reasons for joining the Marines, and then as you go through that journey, if you can reference that key evolving nature of leadership and how you became conscious of it, and perhaps even when it became a thing as opposed to something that you referenced as part of training, that'd be a great way for us to learn more. Thanks, Larry.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Appreciate the opportunity to say a few words tonight. Again, I do a lot of speaking. Certainly, recently spoke at a conference here at the University of Tennessee, but I realize tonight's audience is a very accomplished one, and so I will try to focus my comments on the type of leaders that we have that are tuned in tonight for this. Hey, look, I was born in Toronto, Canada, raised in the Washington, D.C. area. Lost my father at an early age. Relatively simple story going forward. The role models, coaches, mentors, and teachers that I had growing up, of that group, several were retired Marines and had a profound impact on me and sort of helped guide me, I think, to understanding at a relatively early age that service to my nation would be important. So my intent was, upon graduating from the Citadel, I took a commission as a 2nd Lieutenant in the United States Marine Corps with the full intention of doing 4 years and then heading to grad school. And back then in the 80s, everybody thought an MBA was, you had to have an MBA. And so I took my business degree and became an infantry officer. Probably at about the 3-year mark of that first 4-year period, I got a call from the monitor, the detailer in Washington, and said, "Hey, we'd like to send you to San Diego and do some recruit training." Marine Corps has two entry-level recruit training centers, one at Parris Island, South Carolina, and one in San Diego, California. If you enlist east of the Mississippi River, our great dividing line, you go to Parris Island. If you enlist west, you go to San Diego. So I remember coming home and telling my wife, I'd been married about 2 years by then, and she certainly understood the plan of 4 years in the Marine Corps. I said, honey, look, I really love what I'm doing. I think let's just do 2 more years, and she was okay with that. And so 2 years later, I took another set of orders, and then another set of orders. And I speaking as a 3-star general in Okinawa to Marines, oftentimes talking to young NCOs or young officers, inevitably someone would say, hey, sir, you've been in 39 years. When did you decide to make it a career? And my answer was always, yeah, I'm still kind of thinking about it. I never woke up one morning and said, hey, I'm going to be a career Marine. I stayed in for the, men and women on my left and right, and just enjoyed the mission, and enjoyed, like so many young men and women around the world that serve in their militaries do, being part of something larger than yourself. And I think wearing the cloth of one's nation is a noble undertaking, and not for everybody, but I think there's certainly great nobility in that. And I certainly reflect very, very fondly on my experience. And as Alok said, 2 of my 3 sons are Marines today, and certainly very, very proud of that. Hey, I'm gonna run down and cover the waterfront on a lot of different things, and then hopefully we'll have a little bit of Q&A. But one of my old mentors, a guy called Joe Dunford, became the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Joe Dunford used to talk about the 3 most important leadership principles, and they're a little bit unorthodox, but number 1 was surround yourself with good people, and number 2, surround yourself with good people. And I think you probably know what the third one was, and the corollary to that was, and get the hell out of the way and let them do their jobs. And I think it's all, I think the mentality there, and what I learned from him was, it's all about team building. It's about putting together a team that can be successful in peacetime, and most importantly, in wartime. Whether it's military or business, I think team building is important. And as Locke mentioned, I had the great privilege, upon retiring from the Marine Corps, to become a vice president for the 3rd largest wholesale distributor in the United States. And I spent 3 years doing that. Just recently left that, and thoroughly enjoyed it. But team building is equally important in the corporate world. But before you can be a team builder, you got to be a good teammate. But I think good leaders learn to collaborate. I think, when you look at who are the most iconic leaders in history, they're not the ones that had it easy, right? I mean, it's in America, it's Lincoln, it's Martin Luther King, it's FDR, it's those leaders that at those critical times that were able to unite the nation, and in fact, in many ways, the world, to combat the crises at the time. And I think that to be a good leader, you really got to be a good coach. You got to be a mentor, and you got to be that team builder. And I think that's an incredible thing. Physical versus moral courage. I've thought a lot about this. I've written about this. We have, and again, I think a good leader has to be able to exhibit both of those qualities. Certainly, there are in all of our countries, both Australia and the UK and the US, there are countless examples of great physical courage. The Victoria Cross, the Medal of Honor, the Navy Cross. There's so many ways that we recognize these individuals and groups, for incredible physical courage on the battlefield. Moral courage is a lot harder. It's more challenging, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But I think we all have many examples of physical courage. Sadly, there's less known and less documentation of moral courage. But moral courage for a leader is critically important. And again, good leaders seek input. They seek new ideas. not all great ideas come from the top down. And I learned that as an officer, and I certainly learned that in the corporate world. A lot of times, the entry level rank and file or the sergeants that have been around for 20, 30 years, the warehousemen, the drivers, there's a lot of great ideas that should emanate from the bottom up. And, any leader who thinks he's the smartest guy in the room, that's probably a red flag, because it may happen occasionally, but I can tell you it's probably pretty rare. And I think the collective wisdom of any group supersedes the wisdom of any one individual. You don't need to look a lot further than our friend Vladimir Putin. I think one of the most dangerous things for any leader is isolation. And, good leaders seek input. They seek new ideas. Again, not everything comes from top down, but I would tell, and I still talk about it today in the corporate, when I talk to corporations and when I talk to military leaders, have a guy on your team, have a guy in your huddle, not afraid to speak truth to power. Have somebody that is not afraid to knock on the door. Now, he's not going to challenge you publicly. He's not going to challenge you in the middle of the meeting and say, boss, I think you're all wet. But a guy who's not afraid to knock on the door, go, hey, boss, you got a minute? Hey, that thing you want us to do, geez, I'm really, sir, we got some second or third order effects here that, we really ought to think about. You think about Putin, how's that working out for him? The condemnation of NATO and the fear of NATO, and we're worried about Ukraine being part of NATO, and we're going to go in there to prevent that from happening. With Sweden and Finland coming into the alliance, he's now got 1,800 kilometers more of NATO border than he had before this brilliant move. Sweden giving up 200 years of neutrality to join the alliance. You think there was anyone in the room said, hey boss, you sure about this Ukraine thing? Let's review. We've probably got 100,000 casualties. That's KIA. Our economy's in shambles. We've probably lost 500,000 young men fleeing the draft, the brain drain. How's that working out for you, Mr. Putin? Your economy's in shambles. You're a pariah in the world now. You're never going to be welcome to any more international forums. You talk about a guy who needed somebody to be able to knock on the door and go, hey, boss, you got a minute? Can we talk about this? And I'll tell you, I was a practitioner of that. Sometimes I had to beat them back a little bit because they became a little too contrarian. But I think you need that guy, you need that man or woman on the team, not afraid to knock on the door and not afraid to just not challenge you, but sort of offer some options. And I think I think again, the smartest guy in the room is rarely the leader. It might happen occasionally, but not too often. Man, I'm really hopeful tonight that Chairman Xi Jinping has a contrarian on his team. I hope there's a guy in the room with him that is able to speak truth to power. Because I think when you talk about moral courage, the ability to speak up, the ability to say something, whether you're a military leader or a business leader, I think is important. It doesn't make you, just to clarify it, seeking input doesn't weaken you. It doesn't create an indecisive leader who takes counsel of its fears. And I think at the end of the day, any team you build, has got to include, somebody that will talk truth to you, will talk plainly to you. But as you build that team, I think that's an important thing. It's very dangerous, and it can be isolating. And I've seen it as well. As a general officer, sometimes you're in a room where everything you say, everybody wants to echo. Oh, yes, sir, that's a great idea, sir. I wish I thought of that. Be careful, because that can be really a problem if you have a staff and you have a team that falls into that. I took a lot of counsel from my sergeant major. I took a lot of counsel from my executive officer. And now, at the end of the day, when you've taken that counsel, when you've taken those ideas, I think it's important that the team understands, hey, when the boss says, hey, thanks for your input, I got it, but here's what we're going to do. Here's our direction. Here's our azimuth. At that point, whether it's in the corporate world or whether it's in the military. At that point, the boss has spoken, and you got to move out. But hopefully, before you do that, you've had a chance to run the trap lines and see what those second and third order effects are. I'm going to talk about one of the things that I see done pretty well in the military, especially in my Marine Corps, not so good in the business world, and that's powering down, delegating authority. A leader can never delegate responsibility, but he can delegate authority. And I think it's more natural in a military environment. And the example I gave you was in Fallujah. Every squad leader has about 14 guys, 13, 14 folks. Squad leaders are by the table of organization, they should be sergeants, should be well experienced sergeants. Well, you know what happens in the middle of combat? You have attrition, and also sometimes young leaders step up and get promoted because of their actions and because of their ability to thrive in a chaotic environment. And often combat really is rewards those that can thrive in that less than 100% perfect information type environment, which is you're never going to have. And we'll talk about risk here in a little bit. But powering down and delegating authority and delegating tasks to subordinates. It goes back to my opening comment about surrounding yourself with good people ×3 and get out of the way and let them do their jobs. If they're not doing their jobs, replace them. A leader must also be able to act decisively and let people go. And I'll tell you, one of my greatest weaknesses, I thought, looking back on my career, is sometimes your ego gets in the way. And sometimes I thought, hey, I'm such a great coach. I'm such a great mentor. I can make this guy a better leader. I can turn this guy into a good leader. And my ego got in the way, even when people on my staff said, hey, Joe's got to go. Joe's just not doing it. And I was like, no, Joe just needs more of me. Very egotistical, and it gets in the way. And it ended up I had to let Joe go in the middle of a combat deployment. I kicked myself because I should have seen that coming a long time ago. And so don't let your own ego get in the way of making those decisions. But surround yourself with good people. But do not be afraid to divest and replace somebody if they're not holding up to your standard. But back down to powering down, it is less easy to do in business and in the corporate world. People tend to hold power a little bit. I think one of my great examples of the corporate world is I came into an organization, a very good and strong organization, but there was a sense that 32 warehouses in 23 states. Some of those warehouses had some brilliant, very agile and cutting edge tactics and techniques and procedures, as we used to say, TTPs. But they had some great protocols. They had some very innovative things they were doing. They didn't share. So if I'm in Minneapolis and I'm doing something brilliant and it's really profoundly making a difference, hey, if I tell the guys in St. Louis or in Omaha, well, then they're going to start doing it, and then then I won't look so good. And I think early on, the boss, my boss at that time recognized that was a problem, and we had to kind of beat that back a little bit. And I love the old line: institutions get what they reward. And so if you reward transparency, if you reward sharing, if you reward empowering others and cross-fertilizing good ideas, I think that's what you'll get. The best example of that for me is, in the Marine Corps, what did we always, what did we value and what did we reward? Well, physical fitness, being tough, being strong, and being fit. At the same time as I came in, what I learned was the U.S. Air Force was rewarding master's degrees and higher education. And I'm happy to say that by the time I became a field grade officer, the Marine Corps was also honoring that. And that meant you're not going to get promoted to colonel unless you have a master's degree. It wasn't like that when I came in, but I think that had a profound impact because now every major and lieutenant colonel realized if I have any shot at making 06, if I have any shot at becoming a full colonel, I'm going to have to get a master's degree. And I think, there were opportunities out there, but it was hard because now you're doing that oftentimes in your own time. But again, institutions get what they reward. And again, my example, in the corporate world, again, was pretty profound on me. Hey, if I tell my neighbor I don't look quite as good as I did before. But again, so we started doing something where at the general managers meeting, every general manager had to get up and brief. Hey, here's what I'm doing that's really working. Here's my innovative stuff that we've tried that I think everybody should be able to use. And so I thought that was something pretty useful there. I love the old line, if the boss is interested, I'm fascinated. And I think, holding the staff to a standard, your staff, whether it's a business staff or corporate staff or military staff. And again, when the boss is interested in something, I think we, all of us, do everything we can to understand and learn, because, obviously understanding the boss's intent there. I'm going to talk for a minute about risk, and both in military and business. We never use the word gamble. We don't gamble. We don't take chances. We carefully, ritually examine risk. And I think risk management and understanding of risk is central now to everything we're doing. So I am a senior mentor for the Joint Staff. That means we have about 12 retired 3-stars that travel around the world, and we are that horse whisperer, that coach and mentor. We sit in a room with the combatant commanders, and sometimes 3- and 4-star generals and admirals as well, and I think our role is to see how the organization is going and to whisper, hey, I sat through that brief, I thought it was great, but I didn't hear the briefers covering down on these topics, and I think these are incredibly important for you. Risk management is always one of those topics. And of course, today, we're at 5 domains now with cyber and space, and we've taken integration of cyber and space, which even when I was in 2018, were considered those exquisite capabilities. They are now at the tactical level. I think at tactical decision briefs, the integration of space and cyber is discussed and is talked about. So it's become everybody's business. And again, if the leaders are interested in that, I think all subordinates are digging into that quite carefully. But we spend a lot of time talking about risk to mission, risk to force protection. At the end of the day, you're never going to have everything you want. A good example for me is as a young 1-star, I had about 12,000 Marines in Helmand Province, Afghanistan. And we brought, it was the first large-scale Marine presence in Afghanistan. Marines had been in there intermittently. A lot of Marines had gone in on MEUs and some battalions, but in terms of a general officer taking a large-scale force there for a period of time and being given battle space in Helmand, being given a lot of battle space was interesting. So how do we get everybody into the Helmand River Valley? We did a lot of work on that, and what we saw, we did a lot of studying. What we saw is that the Taliban were very linear. They were very good fighters when they were linear, whether it was fighting the Brits or others in or the U.S. Army, very linear. And what I had heard and everything that we had learned was that, but if you got behind them, they unraveled very, very quickly. Now, the Taliban were pretty good speakers and we were pretty good listeners. And so we had a pretty good idea of where we wanted to go. And that was largely behind them. And so in July of 2009, we inserted 3 battalions of Marines in the dark on Marine Corps and U.S. Army helicopters and a battalion of light armored vehicles with an open desert launch into some Taliban-held districts. And but we didn't have everything we needed, and we knew that at some point it would be weeks and weeks before we had everything. But I think my assessment and the assessment of my subordinate commanders was that we had enough. We had enough to get in there. We had enough to get started. And I think at 03, when wave after wave of helicopters were landing down, and the Brits were involved as well, listening to the radio chatter, listening to what the Taliban were talking about, the Taliban just effectively left. They left weapons, they left all their supplies, they broke, and they took off into the hills towards Pakistan. And I think it's very important to understand that that was a very risky move for me and for our Marines. Putting that many Marines in harm's way in the middle of the night on a massive helo lift, the largest helo-borne lift of forces to date in the war, was risk management, and could have gone badly. Thankfully, we didn't lose a bird, and the Marines were able to introduce themselves in a variety of districts up and down the Helmand River Valley. In essence, what we wanted to do was just, establish a presence in some areas we had not been before, areas that had been ceded to the Taliban for a number of years, and launching probably 15 rifle companies into the Helmand River Valley in the middle of the night certainly got under the skin of the Taliban. My great honor and privilege, again, has been leading Marines for 39 years. But I started developing a toolkit early on. And I probably, I tell young guys, you start building that tool belt when you're in high school. You're sitting in the bleachers, you're listening to a coach, you're sitting in a classroom, you're listening to a teacher, you hear things, you see leaders, you see coaches, and I remember thinking, wow, I really like what that guy said. I'm going to remember that. I'm putting that in my tool belt. And I also remember sitting there seeing something going, man, that guy's a knucklehead. If I'm ever in charge, I'm never doing that. And I saw that early on in the Marine Corps, and you keep taking notes and you learn things from senior leaders who you admire, and you put those things in your tool belt. And I think by the time you become a senior leader, hopefully your tool belt is full of a lot of really useful things that will help empower you and help your command. But I think that tool belt is never full. There's always room for another tool. There's always room for another, for better ideas and more opportunities, to get better and smarter and taller as a leader. But again, my great honor and privilege for 39 years is leading Marines, and I think the last thing I'm going to talk about is time. And I talk incessantly about this to military and corporate leaders. The greatest asset you have, the most fragile asset you have is your time as a leader. And I know too often I saw general managers, I saw commanders, subordinate commanders. They felt that they had to be on the computer. They had to be out doing email. They had to be responding. I love the line: the best organization or the best footprint the best fertilizer in any organization is a commander's footprint. It's a boss's footprint. Get out, walk through those warehouses, walk through those motor pools, walk, in the engine room of a ship. You want to find out what's really going on, get out of your office. And, you got other people that can handle the email. You've got executives and you got staff, but a commander's got to be out there. Commander's got to be present. And I'm really proud to say 6 out of 7 days during my combat tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, my sergeant major and I, we were out. We were out with different companies, different units, 6 days a week. And I think if you don't do that, and I missed a hell of a lot of VTCs with higher headquarters, and I had other people sitting in for me, and I was exactly where I thought I needed to be. And I think, as you position yourself on the battlefield, I thought that presence that's where you really get an understanding of what's going on at those remote outposts, at those forward operating bases, at those lines of skirmish. So I think, again, the greatest resource, but the most precious resource any of us have is our time. And again, I saw it in the business world as well. Get out, get from behind the desk. And again, that best fertilizer is that boss's footprint. All right. Hey, I think we're at about 35 minutes in. So, Alok, I'm going to just open up the questions, see if anybody has any questions, and go from there.
So we do have a couple of questions, and obviously everybody, please feel free to sort of roll any questions. A lot of really great insights there. Love the 3 rules. Certainly love the toolkit, and I'm definitely keen to ask a toolkit question. But before that, and you did mention it, Larry, when you talked about risk. And I think there's a really pertinent aspect of taking big risks. And what I'd love to do is in talking about, that very risky move of moving 3 battalions into the Helmand province. Can you give us a corollary between that construct in terms of how did you come to the decision of it's worth taking the risk? And then if you can translate that as best you can in terms of contextually in a business world, what are the factors that you take to say, yes, this is worthwhile, between that moral courage aspect? Because obviously in business, for the most part, we're dealing with moral courage, not so much physical courage unless you're in the PT industry or, you're an athlete. The reality is most of our lives are lived in moral courage. So if you could do that, that'd be great. And if there's if you can add any considerations to the uncertainty that might be directly related to the risk, and also just generally how you move through that uncertainty as you act on that risk, or to manage that risk, or to take the opportunity of that risk where that risk exists.
Yeah. So it was, it was summer of 2009 in Helmand province, and we had started bringing in. We had most of our, initial 12,000 forces, arriving, and so we would, we brought them into our Camp Leatherneck area, and we would have, some familiarization classes, some IED, counter IED classes, and just kind of getting them ready. But these units had trained very hard before they arrived. And then I think the realization was, hey, we got to get going. We'll have these infantry battalions for about 7 months. And I think the situation in some of these areas of Helmand province, Garmsir and south of Garmsir, and some of the other Kenishan areas, I think our feeling was we need to get in there. Here's why we're here. We need to get going. But I think it was not so much when we went, it was how we went in, and the understanding that no, we're not gonna, we're not gonna frontally assault. We're going to be as smart as we can. We're going to use the tools and assets and resources that are available to us. Okay, and we're going to put ourselves in a position where these battalions will helo lift in the middle of the night, and then they're going to be on the move. And we did something I don't know that anyone has done. We told those units for 30 days you're going to be on the move. You're not going to stop and fob up. You're not going to get out of the helicopter and start filling sandbags and building small outposts. You're going to move. You're going to meet the leaders. You're going to move around and meet the Shura councils, the leaders, the elders, and you're going to get that feel for your area. And after 30 days, then you can plant your flag and say, okay, this is where we're going to build our COP. So I think we were just anxious to get started. There was a really challenging mission out there. But again, the drawback was we had probably 75% of what we, probably rated in terms of all of our equipment. We didn't have all the vehicles we needed. And I think we made that decision. We need to go. We'll get that stuff to you. we need to go. We've got the force. The force is well trained. It's well equipped, and it's well prepared for that mission. But I think to go in at night on helos, an element of surprise behind them, I think was not something the Taliban expected. So I think using the element of surprise, I think certainly helped us. Yeah, that was a long night for all of us, just watching and waiting and ensuring until that last helo landed safely and everybody was off and the helos were flying home safely. That was a great night. And then of course, we had 30 days of those units moving, and some pretty good firefights. But again, I think a dominant showing in the Helmand River Valley, and pretty soon I think we were largely in control of that area. Business is tougher. I think in the business I was in, there's always a decision about which products, I think sometimes there are HR issues. I think sometimes for me, the one that really stands out though is COVID. And so I came in July of 19. And of course, COVID hit in March of 21. And, where pretty much most of the world went home, when you're a logistics company, you don't have that option. And I think the boss was really smart when he said, hey, if you're a corporate guy, if you're working in the offices, you're going to come to work, because we have to set that example. That warehouseman, he can't do his job from home. That truck driver can't do his job from home. But I think there was an empowering thing that we certainly seized upon, because I think for the first time in many of their lives, these workers, great workers, but they realized that, hey, my community's counting on me. I can't go home. I am at risk. And again, risk management here, those drivers were delivering groceries and toilet paper and paper. I mean, they were delivering groceries, because people don't quit just because there's COVID. People don't quit eating. People don't quit needing what they need. But those drivers understood that every time they walked into a store and made those deliveries, they were putting themselves at risk. They were putting their family at risk. And, there were states we operated in where people driving to work at 4 a.m. were getting pulled. Hey, why are you on the road? So we had to make placards, laminated placards that everybody had in their personal private vehicle that said, I am an essential servant to my community. And I think, but for the first time for a lot of these guys, it was like, they were a little taller. They just, they were a little puffed up. They felt that, hey, my community's counting on me. And I think that was a really important time for us. And I think the company did a very good job of ensuring that our workforce understood, guys, we can't send you home. But everybody is counting on you. And we had truck drivers in stores. People come up and go, hey, thank you for your service. Thanks for what you're doing. It really resonated with the team. And I think for, at least that first 6 months, until things started to loosen up a little bit, it was a powerful time to be in the logistics in the logistics business, as we really were, the backbone for our communities and trying to keep people moving medicine, moving food, moving supplies. I think the industry really, it was a powerful time for the industry.
Awesome. Thanks, Larry. So one of the questions we've got is, a large difference between the military and business worlds is that leadership is often through influence, and in the latter case versus authority. How have you adapted your military experience to leadership in the business world?
Yeah. My style, probably everybody would have done a little bit differently. Okay, so I come in as a 3-star general, but I'm part of the team now. And so what were my responsibilities? Operations. And I think, again, as I mentioned earlier, trying to break down some of the barriers of sharing and cross-fertilization. That was something I was really interested in. but I wanted to get out there and meet the team. So I got a chance to go to all 32 warehouses. I went out on truck deliveries, probably 6 or 7 times, just sitting in the right seat and unloading all the, telling the driver, hey, today I'm unloading everything. I went on sales calls. I tried to get into every single job that that those drivers had to do, and or the warehousemen. So I think going in there and understanding their business and understanding the risks that they have and the danger they have in their jobs was something important for me. I also had to be able to go back to my boss and say, hey, boss, here's what I'm seeing. I think we got some great people here. We may have a couple people that I don't think are doing quite what they should be. And for a guy that's new to the company, and most of the managers had been there 20, 30 years. So here comes this Marine general into the company, and you got to be very humble because I didn't know anything about the wholesale food distribution business. And it would have been pretty disingenuous for me to come in and act like I knew a lot about the business. But I was smart enough, and I'd learned, my Marine Corps career. I used to love as a Marine. I'd grab a Lance Corporal and say, okay, show me how this new radio works. Show me how this new device works. I'd get under, a light armored vehicle and say, okay, hey, how do I change this part on this vehicle, because this transmission has been giving us a problem. Lance Corporal, explain to me why this is such a problem. Man, Lance Corporals love to do that. They'll get under their vehicle with you and they'll show you what was going on. And I really did the same thing, at the corporate level. I would talk to warehouse workers. I would talk to anyone and say, are we doing this the best way? Is there a better way to do your job? Is there a better way to do things? So I think just putting yourself out there, you don't come in like you know it all, because you don't. And but I think humility in a leader at any level is an incredibly important and much appreciated trait. And I tried to be that humble servant leader.
That's great. Thanks, Larry. So one of the questions that I've got references back to your reference to the toolkit. So what was a couple of the toolkits or tools, I should say, that you most frequently rely upon in business, and maybe a couple when you were in uniform?
Yeah. Again, it goes back for me. I think that's a relatively easy question for me. It goes back to team building. It goes back, and I tell you another thing I probably did a lot more than many is I would be out and I'd speak to young Marines all the time. I mean, just groups. I'm always eager to talk to groups of NCOs. I'd go in a chow hall and sit down at the table. And I think that was very ungeneral-like oftentimes. And so, but I saw that done. I learned that. I saw some of the best leaders I ever knew that were not afraid, to be out there and just go out, shake a few hands, go sit at a table of corporals and sergeants in the chow hall and learn that. I translate that into the business world. I did the same thing there, whether it was a lunchroom at a warehouse or taking some guys out and buying them chow. But I think it's the people skills. And at the end of the day, whether it's in the military or business, it's still a people business. It may be, we might be selling groceries, we might be, selling furniture, but at the end of the day, we're still in a people business. And it's your ability to get the best out of those individuals that I think is what makes some organizations successful and some not. But I think communication is right up there. I always thought it was important as a Marine leader that whenever we went to the field, if we went to the field on Monday morning, I wanted the Marines to know, hey, here's where we're going, here's what we're doing, here's what we want to get out of this week. Instead of, hey, get on the truck, we're going to train. No different in Iraq and Afghanistan. My sergeant major and I would every unit that came in to Iraq and Afghanistan, would hear the sergeant major and I talk, and not in some grandiose level, but at the deck plate, most, a level where you can connect, with that 19, 20-year-old Lance Corporal and Corporal that's in that formation. Here's what we're doing. Here's why this is so important. Here's what I need from you. And I think leaders that can convey and ensure that their folks, whether it's military or corporate, understand what they're doing and why it's so important. And if you can get them to believe that, I think the best organization in the world is where every single member of that team feels that if he fails, that the whole team will fail. And the mechanic, that jet mechanic, I mean, the truck mechanic, that whatever, the guy in the warehouse, if he fundamentally believes that if I don't do my job right, the organization is going to hurt, then you got a winning team. Now, I mean, that's perfection, and we don't live in a perfect world. And no matter how hard you try, not every individual in that organization is going to imbue what you're trying to get them. But boy, if you can get the majority of the team to really understand, here's what we're doing, here's what the boss needs. I've heard it right from the boss. I'm not reading it on an email. And I think if you can do that, your chances of success are pretty daggone high.
That's great, Larry. And I think we will finish on this question, which is a really interesting, gnarly question. Can you provide some clarity on leadership and management, especially in teams that are self-managed or technically competent, but need to lead towards a team organizational goal? Because I think you certainly touched on it in your last answer, but I think there's some added dimensions around management and having multiple teams that are quite capable or technically effective.
Yeah, let me just start out by saying, you hit one of my key themes here, and this was really important in the corporate world. I think it's intuitively understood in the military world, but we don't manage people. We don't manage people in the corporate world. Good organizations don't. We manage programs, we manage budgets, we manage things, but you're leading people. And I don't care if you're working in an office, I don't care if you're in food sales or high tech. You're leading people. You're motivating people on a daily basis. And you can manage the hell out of programs, but once you start trying to manage people, things tend to go sideways a little bit. And I think it's a state of mind that, again, you're never far away. If you're a good leader, you're never far away from motivating, from coaching, from mentoring, from inspiring. And again, an inspirational leader, I think I cannot overestimate the impact that one inspirational leader has on an organization. A leader that shares a message, shares the vision, and can get people excited about what they're doing, whether it's in a high-tech company, whether it's in Silicon Valley, or whether it's in a warehouse in Tennessee. I think that leader is going to have a hell of a good chance of being successful because the people that he is leading will help manage the programs that need managing.
That's great. Thanks, Larry. So just confirm we're good with questions. So I might ask a sort of final question. And that obviously does go back to leadership because you've spoken a lot. I think you've given everybody a whole bunch of really great nubbins or tools to put in their toolkit. I do love your 3 rules. They're always great. It's always great, and I think it's consistent with the way I equally feel. So if you were to summarize your view on leadership and what's important for everyone in order to establish their own sense of leadership, because obviously, one of the biggest things that I found is, we're not, cut from the same cookie cutter. We've got to build in who we are in order to be great leaders. So for you, what would be the message when you define leadership that would help everybody as they start their week here in Australia and start their week tomorrow in the United States? what would be your message on leadership and finding their own sense of leadership or evolving their sense of leadership?
I think the ideal for me would be, it goes back to my time as a young captain, when I worked for a lieutenant colonel, battalion commander. I think it goes back to, any leader can chew our butt, right? Any leader can wire brush us, and any leader can take us to the woodshed. But when you reach a point where you are busting your butt, not because you're in fear of, oh my gosh, if I don't get this done, I'm gonna get punched, I'm gonna get smacked, I'm gonna get down, I'm gonna get a bad mark. When you reach a point where I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna do the best of my ability, because I don't want to let my boss down. I don't want to let my leader down. I believe in him so much. Once you get to that point, I'm not worried about the butt chewing. Once you get to that point, then you probably found a pretty good leader. And so you flip that. How do you become that kind of leader, where you have inspired your people, you have motivated your folks, you have given them a vision, and you've created an environment where, yes, obviously you're the boss, you can always discipline or whatever, but they're working really hard for you out of respect, because they don't want to let you down. And I think that was kind of an epiphany time for me. It's like, man, I want to be that kind of leader. I want to be like him. And I want people to work for me, not because out of fear, but out of respect, and because they don't want to let me down. That's hard to do. That's really tough to do. But I've experienced that as a subordinate, and I don't know if I ever achieved it, but I certainly understood that was an ideal that I wanted to achieve. And so I think that's the self-actualization, to me, the be all end all. If you can work for somebody that you respect so much that you just don't ever want to disappoint them, you want to continue to do great things. It doesn't mean you won't, from time to time, kick one in the bleachers. And I think that goes to another topic too, and that is, the zero defects mentality. You got to be very careful of that. And I think sometimes in the Marine Corps, we kind of ebbed and flowed on that. Sometimes you accept too much, malfeasance, and sometimes you don't accept any. And I think there's got to be that sweet spot in the middle. And I think that's true in the corporate world as well. There are unforgivable sins, right? There are those unforgivable sins. I think breach of integrity. I think anybody ever, lied to me, that was it. You don't get a second shot on that one. But I think sins of commission are those unforgivable ones versus sins of omission, where I didn't get it right. I can do better. And, I would encourage, and we used to talk about this a lot. For my young lieutenants, captains, hey, throw stuff against the wall, see what sticks, especially, in Iraq or Afghanistan, when you're in a counterinsurgency environment. Try something new. And if it doesn't work, great, don't do it again. Now, some of those things will end up being mistakes. Man, we shouldn't have done that. But I would rather have a young leader that is trying to innovate and is trying new things, even if, more than half the time those things turn out to be, they don't work so well. Now, if you keep making the same mistake over and over again, I'll start to think you're not very bright and you probably need to go away. But if you're trying, and if you have some good ideas and you want to try to implement those, and you're doing it for all the right reasons, even if that turns out to be a mistake, I'm okay with that. I can get past that. I can get past a judgment mistake. But again, the infallible ones would be an integrity breach. Those are the ones. If I can't believe what you're saying, if I can't trust what you're saying, people could potentially lose their lives, and I just can't put up with that. So I don't know if that answers the question or not, but I think that shaped me probably more than anything. It's about leading, inspiring, motivating people, and if you really take care of the people, I think the rest follows pretty well.
No, I think that's amazing, Larry. Thank you. And I think we're at that point where we're at time. So I want to say, General Nicholson, thank you for your service. Thank you for your time. We are certainly honoured, and that has been echoed in the chat. And certainly we're looking forward to talking further in due course. And certainly we'll be bringing you back on for more chats with more great people and further evolving leadership in this dialogue. So thank you very much.
Great. Thanks a lot. I appreciate the opportunity to just provide a few insights and comments.